Good afternoon. So we're here today with Susan Walsh, the classification guru and the
Hi.
fixer of dirty data. Hi, Susan.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here and to be talking to you. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about your own background. What first got you really excited about data? Was it the dream from a young age to be a data classification guru?
Definitely not. It wasn't even really, well, actually thinking back now, there were signs. I did really love doing computing at school. I was like one of three girls in the class and I always got really good marks, but I kind of left that, went off and got a business degree. Then I still didn't really know what I wanted to do after 4 years of studying. So I thought, oh, I've worked in Woolworths, so let me kind of stick on the retail vein. And I went on to become a merchandiser. So I'd go around and make sure that all the paint tins in B&Q were facing the right way and to planogram. Then I kind of fell into sales and then national account management. And then I realized actually that's what I thought I should be doing rather than what I actually wanted to do.
It's starting to make sense now. So the paint tins facing the right way, a little bit of OCD there maybe?
Yeah. So I guess, real life categorization, yeah. And even in my cupboards at home now, I like to have things in order. And actually, if you've listened to any of Scott Taylor's talks, he talks about when he was young, he used to sort his Lego into the shapes and the colours before he'd start to build things.
So
and I'm like, yeah, that's a bit like me.
As well.
Yeah. And then, so I decided to open a women's clothes shop in Guildford's. I saw an opportunity and a gap in the market where, we'd all been working in offices and it was very much suits, blouses and shirts and all that kind of stuff. But it was changing towards a more smart casual office work environment, but there wasn't really anywhere that you could go and online shopping was just taking off. So I opened this shop up and it was an amazing experience. I literally set up my company. I chose the decor, had it kitted out. I chose all the clothing, staff, did my own account. I learned so much, but after 8 months, it was just unsustainable. The rent and the rates were so high and I'd racked up so much debt that I had to shut everything down and I just needed a job and I needed just anything. And I went on Gumtree and saw this ad for data entry, data classification. I thought, I'm not sure what that is. Let's try it out. It happened that it was a spend analytics company in Guildford. And as soon as they started giving me work, I found that it just really naturally came to me being able to classify data, knowing what companies were spending the money on. And I think that was because I had a background in the corporate world that just could see things, not necessarily in a black and white way, but read between the lines, which is what you need when you're classifying spend data. So that's where it all started.
And I guess that space spend data is a really hot topic right now. I guess.
Yeah, and it's grown a lot. So that was 8 years ago that I started that. And I worked with that spend analytics company for 5 years and I had such a great time and learned so much and, ended up being responsible for a team of 14 people, making sure all the projects were running on time, training them, developing them. But I felt I'd got as far as I could go. And I guess once you have that taste of having your own business, I don't think that ever leaves you.
That entrepreneurial spark.
Yeah, and also, I'm responsible for my decisions. There's only so much you can change within any organization when you're an employee. When it's your company, you can do what the hell you want.
Absolutely. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, and again, I saw an opportunity. All these companies are spending much money on analytics software, data cleansing software, AI, machine learning, and the issue is not really with the software. That's the expensive bit that they pay all the money for. But the actual most important bit that people don't really focus on is getting the data ready, getting the data clean, tidy and organized so that when it does go into the software, the output that you are getting is usable, it's trustworthy, it's what you need, and that seems to be forgotten. So, and even now, I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 3 years. There's not really anybody else that's doing data classification as a standalone service. So I'm trying to really promote the importance of it before
Absolutely.
you install any software.
No, you're absolutely right, and we've worked on a few big projects, you know, and historically working for other consultancies as well. And you kind of get halfway through the project before you really start to realise that data quality is a big issue. There's lots of data integration being built. And one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that this is something that needs to come right at the start of the project. You need to profile your data. You need to start looking at understanding and trying to identify those issues early, because by the time you've spent, you know, might be hundreds of thousands, might be millions in some instances of projects. And you know, by the time you get to the end of those projects and you realize actually the data's not great and the information you're getting out the other end is going to result in bad decisions, you know, those things could have been identified really early, and you would have probably taken a very different path in some of those things. So I think, yeah, one of the things I've certainly learned in my career is that before you do anything, don't dive into technology. Understand what questions and problems you're trying to solve, and then make sure you've got the foundations in place to be able to do that. So yes, you might have the data, but is it accurate? You know, is there duplication in there? Is there missing fields? You know, have we got the ingredients really to be able to build what we want to build successfully? And I think a lot of the times those ingredients are missing, and data quality and classification of that data and master data, which is what Scott talks a lot about, as you mentioned, is a huge part of that. So is this, you know, so rather than investing heavily in software and technology and standing up teams of consultants, this is one of the places you recommend you really start in terms of analytics.
You should, I mean, regardless of whether you're using new software or not, you should have accurate data. You know, and one of the things that you might find if you do install new software without having accurate data is not only will that information be wrong, but then you lose the trust of the people in the organization using it. So they're then fearful and reluctant to actually use it at all. And then you may have spent, like you say, hundreds of thousands or millions on something that your staff will refuse to use because they don't trust it. And even if you can get to the stage where you fix it, you know, you could be paying the same amount of money again just to get it to the point that you needed it to be at the start.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a good point there. If you lose the trust of the people using that technology, it's very hard to win it back, because all of a sudden, well, I don't trust these numbers, I don't trust this system. So I think again, you know, it comes back to, you know, get it right early on, because the other kind of counter argument, I guess I've heard, that if you just build it, we'll then be able to surface the dirty data and we can then see it and we can start to correct it. So analytics will help you to do that. I can see you shaking your head. So
my blood is boiling right now. That's a lot of money to invest just to find out something's not working. And I think you've seen, I've done some blogs where I've showed people how simple it is just to use Excel to check your data. So you don't need expensive software just to check the basic quality of your data. And it doesn't take long. You can do it within 5-10 minutes to get an idea of where you are. And it's so important. And I also talk, you know, I say always start with the end in mind. So you know that you want to report on how many blue pencils that you are using, you know, a bit of a specific example, but if you don't have that information or invoice data, you can't report on that. So you have to like lower your expectations. So, okay, maybe let's just look at pencils then. Okay, well, you still don't have pencil information in your invoice. You only have writing instruments. Okay, so we can only analyze writing instruments. Or do we go back to the supplier and get them to give us more detailed breakdown of our invoices so that we can do that? But, you know, if you wait until you've installed your software to do that. You might have to redo a whole load of work, build a completely new taxonomy to classify this data, or you might get halfway through and find out it's not possible. It's much better to find all this out at the start, and manage your expectation. And I do get that a lot of companies don't know what they want to see. I definitely find this within classification when I have clients who've never had their data classified before. So, maybe a draft taxonomy will classify some stuff, and then they'll go, actually, no, we want to see this and this and this. So you have to tweak it a little bit more until you get it right. And then you do that with a test set of data before applying it to the whole data set. And then, it's easier to manage.
So start small and think big, because I think that's the other thing that I see, is that people see this as a bit of an overwhelming challenge. And I think human nature is to avoid the complex stuff and try and address the more simple things. So
let's pretend it's not happening.
Let's bury our head in the sand on this one, and focus on something else. But actually, if you break it down into chunks, what is it? We're going to look at our, let's look at our product hierarchy, or like you say, let's look at our invoices and how we categorize.
How's our supplier normalization? Do we even do it? Let's look at how we need to do that. What about customers? Like, if we have, do we have a database that's clean and tidy, free of duplicates? Are the addresses in the right columns? Do we have the right format for phone numbers and email addresses? All these things that generally don't get found out until it's too late.
Yeah, and I worked on a project for a big automotive manufacturer, and it was an interesting, during the discovery workshops, one of the engineers said, the only person that knows how much we spend with a supplier is the supplier, because that supplier data was so messy. It was, different versions of the same supplier. Actually, there was no ability to kind of aggregate total amount paid to that supplier. What that means is it was very difficult to then go and negotiate prices down with the supplier when you don't really know how much you're spending with them. Whereas if you realize that you're actually spending, 100
double
million
sometimes or more,
huge amounts of money, you can have a much more effective conversation saying, hey guys, we spend, all this money with you across your group. Let's have a conversation about how we can get some kind of discount and negotiate better. So it's I've seen it in practice as well. And I noticed one of the things you do really well, Susan, is call out real examples. So you wrote a piece for Digital Procurement World, and you mentioned that a client had categorized £25,000 of spend against IBM.
I have to say I can't remember the exact value, but it always stood out for me that how could you not know that you had IBM classified as cleaning? It always really stuck in my mind, because people are scared of data. It's really important to know and understand your own data. Look at it a couple of times a week, every. And then when things are not right, it becomes a lot easier to spot them.
And would you say that should be a role within a business, a specific role? And I know obviously companies can outsource that to organizations such as yourself, but actually should there be somebody in the business that owns data quality? And I guess that's difficult for smaller businesses.
Yeah, I would say it's everybody's responsibility to manage and make sure that there's accurate data, and it doesn't matter who you are within the organization. You will know your own part of that data. And actually, for me, my business is all about kind of getting them ready to then send them off on their own to manage their own data. I'm there at the start to kind of hold their hand, be a nice kind of good entry point for them. I'll do all the work. You don't have to learn any software, and then it's up to them if they want me to manage that or whether they want to take it on themselves. But they should always be aware of their data, and it's not necessarily a procurement thing, it's not necessarily a data thing, it's not necessarily a finance thing. There should be multiple people within the organizations that can look at the data and tell if it's right or not. And there are things, there's patterns and checks you can do. So you don't even need to be an expert within that area to be able to check it and make sure it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's so important.
And you mentioned people feeling afraid of data. I read an article recently, 75% of people in 2020 report that they feel overwhelmed when looking at data, which is huge. And maybe that's one of the reasons for this sort of, bury our head in the sand, it'll be fine kind of approach. So I guess the answer is to reach out to those people that aren't afraid of data, the people that love it, right? And actually want to get stuck in and
yes, but they are already, my cheerleaders. They're already saying, yes, we know what you mean. We struggle with this all the time. What I'm really trying to do is take that the talk and the language down to a even lower level, and just talk about it in a way that you could pick someone off the street who had no knowledge and be able to explain to them and get them to understand in a basic way why it's important and why they should be doing it. And it's really important not only to target the decision makers at the top of the organisations right now, but also all the people coming through now are going to be future decision makers, because it might be too challenging to change the minds of current decision makers. But if you can persuade and engage with the future decision makers, then that's a whole sea change of attitude towards investment in data, because I think people see it as a cost right now, whereas it is an investment.
Yeah, and I've seen you use that quote in your article, and I like that. It's an investment. It's not a cost.
Just to get the message across, but I will keep on fighting, and
Well, it is how you communicate, it's how you message. I think that's so important, because if you start talking about, master data and data governance, and, people just glaze over. They do. What does that mean? I don't understand. So I think bringing it down to a level where, like you say, you can pull someone off the street and explain it to them is really, really important. Our own vision is to create a world where data makes sense, because at the moment, it doesn't to so many people. So I think if we create a world where data makes sense by simplifying, the concepts and the language that we use, by actually simplifying the technology as well that we use. So
it doesn't make us any less smart just because we are talking in simplistic terms. I think,
exactly.
maybe that's a bit of an issue. We want to show off our knowledge, but it's only useful to the people who understand. Otherwise, it's not useful at all.
I often share Elon Musk's internal letter about acronyms, and he says acronyms suck. I don't know if you've seen it, but he called out. Heard about it. Yeah, well, I'll share it with you after. But he says he calls out some examples of some acronyms which have more syllables than the actual words themselves. So he says the acronym is longer than the bloody word, I think, is what he says in his letter internally. And it's interesting, like you're right. I think there's this almost need to sort of sound like we're super intelligent, super smart, and actually bringing it down a level and just articulating something with simplicity is. There's a lot to be said for that. I also know some of my purist kind of data colleagues will be sort of shaking their heads at the thought of using Excel. Now, I like to be more pragmatic and go, do you know what? Again, it's helping people understand it. You throw them a new technology and say, hey, look, you can profile your data and do all this clever stuff. There's a good chance they're not going to use it because they maybe
got to learn it first.
So is that the reason you would sort of say, hey, just open Excel, start having a look?
So personally, I hate Excel. I use software called Omniscope, which is data modeling and visualization software. And I could, I've got videos on my YouTube channel, and I can easily show you how I do, how it's transformational and takes half the time Excel takes. But maybe 1% of the audience has Omniscope and knows how to use it, whereas everybody who reads a blog or watches a video will use Excel. So, I use that so that I can speak to everybody on an equal level, because some people will be using Tableau, some will be using Click, and there may be ways within those to do some of the things that I do in Excel. But by showing it in Excel, anyone can take it, and then anyone who uses something else can translate it into whatever software they're using.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes
I
sense.
don't want
Everyone
to.
understands Excel to an
Yeah,
extent.
yeah, and I don't, it by showing them in the software that I use, I am then excluding and putting people off because they think, oh well, I don't have that, or I don't know how to use that. Whereas if you show them in Excel, there's no excuse for you not to be able to check your data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Be the really slow and long approach, but it's still a way. It still can be done.
absolutely, absolutely. So one of the other things you talk about in the article you wrote, Digital Procurement World, is you talk about poor quality data, and this is something that I've talked about with clients as well, being a barrier to AI and a barrier to automation. Now, I recently heard a CFO in an organization had been to a conference, and it was all about AI and automation. And we're going to do AI, we're going to do automation, and everyone's keen to kind of jump on this bandwagon. Yet at the same time, we don't want to invest in master data. We'll just build lots of mapping tables and lots of we'll patch over the cracks, but we're going to do AI and automation. Whereas one of the things the conversation I had with that particular organization is that the quality of your data, the governance and the master data are things that they create this a common language across your organization, so your systems can talk to each other. Now, when you're talking about AI and automation, you're essentially talking about getting systems to talk to each other and getting systems to automatically make decisions. Potentially, data quality, I mean, has got to be right at the forefront of that, surely, because I see organizations maybe haven't, and I'm sure some have, because there's different levels of maturity, right? But some organizations haven't quite got to that realization that the things that you do have to underpin everything else, all the fancy stuff. And it's called a maturity curve for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is a question in there.
No, it's there's a myth within the industry that software will solve all your problems, and I am absolutely pro automation and AI. Get me wrong, but I always say that you need to start with a human looking through the data, and the reason is that AI or machine learning or even set of rules that are programmed in are all used based on existing data. So if that existing data is wrong, it's learning the wrong stuff. So whether it's classification or supplier normalization or some other kind of categorization, even RPA, if it will automatically scan invoices and things, but you have to make sure that it's programmed to pick up the right boxes, and it's tagging things as the right thing, and that has to be done by a person to guide the AI, the machine learning, the RPA to do the right thing following on from that. And there's no magic bullet, there's no button that you can press or software that you can run for that to happen. You have to get your elbows dirty and just get in and do it, or pay someone to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no different to the way that, I don't know if you've seen Google Photos, you can search for a strawberry or whatever it is, and it will bring up all of those images for you. But ultimately, even that stuff. So I had a pop-up saying, what do you see in this picture? And you kind of go, well, there's a road and there's a whatever else. And so even Google is saying, hang on a minute, we need human input to be able to use AI on images. And it's no different in organizations, is it? We need human input.
Yeah.
The computer then to be able to, make a decision or categorize something effectively.
So I've just done some training for iData Quality Academy, and that's launching in the summer, and I'm covering AI and machine learning on that. And the example that I use in that module is there was a lady who took several images of muffins and chihuahuas and used several different APIs to auto-classify or identify them as a muffin or a chihuahua. And she used about maybe 10 or something, and only one correctly identified a muffin as a muffin. You know,
Right. Wow.
sometimes it was just a bakery product. I think at one point it was somebody classified it as a cuddly toy. So yeah, again, it just shows you it's clever, but only with our guidance.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a similar case where I was trying to do sentiment analysis, and it was all around Boris Johnson during the election time,
Wow.
and there was a lot of sarcasm which was getting picked up as positive. I'm not going to say what it said.
Yeah,
There was a couple of examples I picked out that said, "Oh, it's really good," but
yeah,
actually it was a sarcastic comment that the computer didn't
yeah,
understand, recognize, and we just used one of the open source natural language kind of processing
yeah.
things. So I'm not going to go techie, having said don't talk techie, but it's really
Well, let's
interesting
chat a
because
little bit. That's okay.
it just kind of really dawned on me then that actually, yes, this stuff is really clever, but there's a way to go yet before it can really start to replace humans. So until then, we need that human intelligence, and we need to
There
invest.
are some humans that don't get sarcasm either. So,
Oh, that's pretty true. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I've got a good example of that. I wrote a blog called "How to Build a Data Swamp," uh,
yeah.
and it listed out the first 5 steps on how to build a data swamp. And
Yeah.
somebody who didn't get sarcasm responded saying, "This is crazy. Like, this is exactly what I tell my clients not to do." And I said, "Did you read until the end?" And she then responded saying, "Okay, I didn't realize you were being sarcastic." So there are indeed people that don't get sarcasm. So next question, and I didn't include this in the brief which I sent across, but I would just interested to get your perspective on the current scenario, COVID-19.
Yeah.
On the news, everyone's talking about data right now. So,
Yeah.
flattening the curve and all that kind of stuff, and the
Yeah.
R that we would have heard about. But also, organizations are in a very different position. Whether the ones that are tech savvy, the ones that have got good quality data to make decisions, and in your space, spend analytics. I mean, wow,
Yeah.
what an absolutely critical time to be able to understand where you're spending your money and where you should continue to invest and where you can cut back.
Yeah.
So what do you think this sort of situation means for businesses? Will people start to look at this more closely now? Will this have sort of shined a light into some of the frailties in organizations which have
Absolutely.
poor
I
quality
think
data?
procurement and it's as an industry has a huge spotlight on it now. I mean, I knew what PPE was before this whole COVID situation because I've classified so much of it over the last 8 years. But, most people weren't even aware of PPE. And imagine, suddenly everybody needs PPE and you have data that's classified. Now it could be procurement data or maybe it's inventory data so that you know exactly how many gowns or masks or whatever in groups or categories, that you can say, right, okay, we can do this, we can ship it there. If you don't have that visibility and it's just a product code, that's going to be really difficult to get the right products to the right people at the right time. Even know for future planning and manufacturing, how much you need to make. And right now, there's a global shortage. So it's even more important to know exactly where everything is so that you can move it around if you need to. So I would hope that it will get people thinking more about the importance of data within their organisation. I exhibit at eWorld procurement once a year, and you would be absolutely terrified at the number of organisations I speak to, some very large that don't even classify their data. Or they say, oh, we just use GL codes. That
I've seen it before.
Yeah, and GL codes are notoriously unreliable. They're used by finance for a completely different purpose. It's not going to give you the information you need from a procurement perspective. And it's not even a really good backup, you know, oh, well, it's okay, at least we've got something. It's misleading you 90% of the time, I would say. So yeah, please get classifying.
Absolutely. Well, Susan, it's been amazing talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
How do people get in touch with you, reach out?
So I basically live on LinkedIn. So Susan Walsh, the classification guru. On Twitter, I'm at classification G. And then, of course, there's www.theclassificationguru.com. And you can get links to my YouTube channel from there as well.
Fantastic. And we will share your contact details in the post as well. Susan, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.